All right. Dr. Wendy O'Connor, I am so grateful that you're here on my podcast. Welcome to Becoming Secure with Mike's Mindset. As I told you introductory, I've been going down this rabbit hole lately of understanding men and understanding women. And you have expertise on how women keep deceiving themselves. And I've read your website and your profile, and I've prepared some questions for you. So I'm so excited to get into it, but I would love it if you could introduce yourself to my guests.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here, and this is a conversation that gets me really excited. So I'm very excited to share this with your listeners today.
Awesome.
And yeah, I'm just excited to dive in. I can't wait to hear what you have to ask me today. It's going to be a great conversation.
Yeah. Well, why don't you start by telling a little bit about your educational background when it comes to like this particular expertise of yours?
So I've been a licensed psychologist for the last, I think it's now 18 years,
Mhm.
which always sounds wild to me. How am I this old? But I am this old. So I've been practicing for a very long time. I knew I wanted to be a psychologist in seventh grade, which is the exact age of my oldest daughter. Somehow we had a psych class, and in that psychology class, the teacher came in one day and said, "Hey, I'm going to teach you today about the professions, what your choices would be if you decided to become a psychologist." And one of the things she talked about was clinical psychology, specifically those psychologists who work in private practice. And I got very excited because what she described as a clinical psychologist, somebody who helps others feel better, I thought to myself, I can't believe you can get paid for that because I do this for free with my friends.
Oh,
And it's so fun. And I'm seemingly good at the time. You know, you think everything's all so different at the time. And I said, that's it. This is the thing. I know exactly what I want to do. And very surprisingly, I never wavered. I never questioned it. I never wondered. I never thought about some other career. That was it. Clinical psychology. I'm going to be a psychologist. I went to undergrad in Vermont at University of Vermont, and then I went to graduate school at Stanford. Stanford created a consortium with another psychology school. They created a clinical psychology program called a PsyD, Doctorate of Psychology. And I did my 5 years there and then went into private practice, which I loved until I didn't and I burnt out. And then I started to really dive into this work of why are women so incredibly capable, intelligent, brilliant, high achieving, and how is it that we do all the right things and still wake up dissatisfied or unfulfilled? There's got to be something missing. And that's how I landed here in this work.
oh my goodness, that's so interesting. I love that you just knew. What a relief.
Yeah,
So,
it
no, continue. Sorry.
that's it. It was a relief. It was such a strange thing because it's so unusual. It would be so surprising if my daughter came home from school and said to me, "I know exactly what I'm doing," and she never wavered in that. I mean, that's fascinating to me. But yeah, that was lucky. It just worked out.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. So, based off of do you remember a moment during your studies where you just had like this major aha moment where something just clicked and you just could not continue further the same way with this new information?
You mean just in my like general clinical studies?
Yes, something that you learned in your studies that was just groundbreaking in many ways.
No.
You don't have anything like that?
No, no, I don't, which is funny. And I'm sure if we went back in time 100 years ago and we put littler me back in school, I would be saying to you, oh, there's this really amazing thing I learned today.
Yeah.
But overall, no, for me, to be quite frank about it, I went to graduate school and I jumped through the hoops you needed to jump through to become the person I wanted to become, to get to what I wanted. And while I do have a love of learning,
Yeah.
I wanted to get through it. I wanted to get to the life that I pictured for myself. And I was less focused on picking up or really loving every moment of that process. A lot of the journey in graduate school, when you're getting your doctorate, isn't all, in my experience, fun and exciting and interesting. And so for me, it was how do I get through this process and jump through the hoops I need to jump through to
Mhm.
get to the place that I wanted to land? And the place I wanted to land was to work independently in a private practice that's all my own,
Okay.
just me and my patients. And I just wanted to live a very simple, successful life.
Got you. I mean, how on brand. I know like the first thing on your page is literally the answer is no.
Oh my gosh, see how natural it is for me to say no? That's ridiculous. Yes, the answer is no. There's not one thing that stands out that was groundbreaking or changed my life at the time. It was a lot of just learning all the things you need to learn for a big degree.
Yeah,
And then where things get interesting, I find, is more life experience. When you start working with people, when you start living life more fully on
yeah.
your own, that's when all of a sudden things get you get more curious, you question things, you reframe things, you rewire your mind. There's so much change in real life experience that I think informs
Right.
ourselves, how we are and who we are.
Right. No, for sure. I 100% agree with that. And well, I guess then, so for someone who doesn't know anything about like what a clinical psychologist does, like what is it that you do?
I would describe it the same way my seventh grade teacher did, which is you help people feel better. The way my practices were designed in the beginning and for the first several years was to help people mostly with depression, mood, and anxiety disorders. So, a lot of depression, stress management, a lot of anxiety, panic disorder. I would work with individuals, couples, children, adolescents, young adults. And the goal was to help alleviate symptoms of depression, to help alleviate symptoms of anxiety, to help people get to a place where they weren't struggling so much and that life felt like more doable. They
Mm.
could function, they could hold relationships and jobs and feel less distracted by their mood or by their worries. And
Mhm.
that's what I built out for many years. I had two incredibly beautiful, thriving practices, helped a lot of people, really, truly meaningful work. And then I had three daughters, and my daughters were born 15 months apart. And that's what kicked off my burnout part of the journey because I, on the paper, had it all and had a really beautiful, successful life and had so much to be grateful for and truly was. But then I started to feel like almost the obligations and the commitments and the yeses of life started to catch up with me. And it was during that period that I started to burn out. And I said, there's got to be something better than this. There's got to be more than just helping people function well and alleviate symptoms. And there's got to be more than me checking boxes and surviving the days as a new mom and going through the motions of a day that feels like the same as yesterday and the same as the day before. And you feel like you're just living on this hamster wheel. And I was just racking my brain around there needs to be more that makes life feel lit up again and exciting and full of zest and promise and opportunity. And that's when I started to study positive psychology, understanding that there is a science of happiness and how we do have so much more control over our happiness than we think we do. And then when I started to integrate that into my own life and saw the benefits, I said, this is it. This is how we help people thrive and not just survive and check boxes and function, but how we really help people. And specifically, my work has been with women in the coaching world, how we truly get women to a place where you wake up to a life that you want to wake up to, a life that makes you happy. That's not just about checking boxes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's just so many different like now my conversation wants to steer in so many different directions with questions I hadn't even thought about because you're bringing up so many points here. When you're even, I mean, I did not plan to talk about this, but now I'm just so immensely curious. I'm just going to go with my instinct and ask the questions nonetheless. So, one of the things that's been a topic among my friends lately is just like ever since I moved back to Norway, we're talking about like what are the benefits, etc. And one of those benefits are, for instance, like when you're in the workforce, you can stay at home for a year with your baby and still have your full pay. Whereas in the US, that's just not the case. And you just described that you had three children and it was 15 months apart, meaning that like I understand that you were burnt out, but what was that experience like for you and how did you even recover between everything having to go back to work? Like what did your life look like during that time?
This is what really was groundbreaking. So, what was groundbreaking in terms of my experience on this life journey as a psychologist was this chapter of my life.
Yeah.
I had grown these practices and had success there. I had these three beautiful babies. I had a happy marriage. I had the home. I had all these pieces of what looks like such an amazing life, but I was really tired and I couldn't keep up. And I gave so much energy out and I did not have enough coming back in. And as a high achieving woman, you think to yourself, just push harder. This is just a grinding season. And there are grinding seasons in life. So I'm not going to say that there aren't. But I knew that this was different. And the weirdest experience that I'll never forget was when I went back to work in my practice. My daughter was 11 weeks old. And it is my biggest life regret is putting her in daycare at 11 weeks old. And I will never forget this moment. I remember it like it was yesterday where I was sitting in my practice. My husband had a job down the street. So we were really close by, but not, together. And my daughter was in daycare across town. And I just sat there between patients at this one moment and just thought, this just feels wrong. There, I couldn't describe it any other way other than this is wrong. What am I doing in this room? And my husband's over there in that space, and my daughter's over there across town. Like, I was like, this is not at all what I thought it would feel like to be a successful mom. I thought it would feel like that's natural. And my daughter's doing great over there. My husband's doing great over there. And I'm meant to be over here. And then we're all going to come together later today. And it's all going to be a beautiful picture.
Yeah.
But what I found was that it felt wrong. And because it felt so wrong, I came home and I said to my husband, this feels wrong. I remember even texting him from my office and being like, this doesn't feel right. And he's like, of course it doesn't. You just went back to work. This is not going to feel natural. And I thought, well, why would I be living a life that doesn't feel natural or right to me? There was this weird moment where it almost felt like time stopped. Everything I was told halted. And I thought, wait a second, everyone who's done this before me, everyone who said this is just how it goes, this is not my way. And I started to do some deep work around if this isn't it, what is it? And so your question around, well, what did you do? Like, how did you start to then have these three babies? And this was even before the other two babies came into the existence, my twins. And I was already feeling like this was wrong. I ultimately said, I'm not going to do success the way people tell me I'm supposed to. And I'm not going to do happiness the way people tell me I'm supposed to. I need to do it my way. And if I don't do it my way, I'm not going to be the best mom I can be. I'm not going to be a good psychologist. I'm not going to be a good wife. In fact, my husband at the time said to me one day when I got home late from my office, I was taking care of my daughter, and he just said, have you even looked at me today? And I just thought, I don't think so. I don't think I've looked at you today. I didn't know I had to add that to my list. Oh my God. My list just keeps growing. And I say that jokingly, but really it was this pivotal moment of, oh my goodness, everything's backwards. How
Yeah.
did we get here? And you get here like that. You get here overnight. You just all of a sudden, the way your life looks is not necessarily the way your life feels.
Yeah.
So I redesigned it and I said, that's it. I'm not living by somebody else's script. How do I want my life to look? I want to work certain hours and not other hours. I want to have a lot of family time. And I just started to think about what do I value? And as soon as I connected my design with what my desires were in that chapter, what my core values were, and what my signature strengths were, then I was like, okay, I have tools to put the puzzle together. And that's what I did. I will say, chose a career that I can be flexible. I'm my own boss. I will always be my own boss because it's so important to me to have a life that reflects the way I want to feel in it,
Yeah.
not to have a life that reflects the way somebody else defines success.
Right. Yeah. Wow, that's such a beautiful answer and such a good realization to have. And I can imagine that there's a lot of women who are listening to this and can resonate and relate to it in so many ways, yet feel like it's impossible to do something about, or maybe it could be rational logistical things that would make it really hard to break that pattern or to try something else, or it could just be a bunch of excuses as to why one can't. So how would you then approach a woman to make her feel encouraged enough in herself or believe in herself so that she understands that you too can in fact do what feels natural to you and lean into who you were born to be or who you want to be?
Yeah, and who you're born to be or who you want to be, first thing I want to say about that is that gets to change.
Mm,
Giving yourself permission to change your mind, to pivot your plan, to change the path. A lot of women that I work with get very caught up in and scared of change
yeah.
because the fear is that it won't be right or that I'll fail or it won't go well. But when it comes to living a life that makes you happy, that truly not just happiness in like the next purchase you make on Amazon, happy, like content, fulfilled from the inside out, comes from you staying connected with yourself.
Yeah.
And so the encouragement is just you cannot let yourself detour too far away from your self-trust. And this is where I see women abandoning themselves all the time, is because they keep living according to other people's expectations or hopes for them or ideas of them, of who they should be or who they have been. And the reality is there may be a different season of life where hustle and grind is all the rage for you, and there might be a different season where success and happiness are really meant to be something different. You have to give yourself that permission to pivot and to not look at your decisions like life sentences. That just because I've done this for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years means I must do it, or it's the only thing I can do, or it's the only way to live. It's truly not. And the more that we can allow ourselves to consider the alternative and to keep those wheels turning in our brain around curiosity and seeing other women happy and successful and saying, if she can, so can I. What's my version of that?
Yeah.
That's what's going to keep you connected to yourself.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm kind of speaking a little bit to some of the things that you talked about earlier, but I think it could still be relevant here. I heard this saying, and I wonder to what extent you believe this to be true through your studies. And I heard where someone said that in order for you, if you are experiencing depression, you are focusing on the past. And if you're experiencing anxiety, you're focusing on the future, whereas if you're experiencing peace, you're living solely in the present. Do you believe that there's some truth to that?
I think there is some truth to that. I mean, oftentimes you will see what people get depressed a lot about are the shoulda, woulda, couldas, or missed opportunities, or wishing life had gone different, wishing they had made different decisions. But also, depression largely does exist in the present. You know, what people are going through during a depressive episode is currently happening. Those thoughts are currently existing, and those thoughts can often be depressing about the future. So we can feel depressed about what we think is possible for us, what we think is likely, what we think is guaranteed, even though there's no guarantees. But depression can have quite a hold on us, especially when it comes to rigid thinking and all or nothing thinking and catastrophizing. And so depression can really be part of past thinking, but also future oriented thinking. Same thing with anxiety. You know, we can look back and feel like we get stuck in these loops of wanting to almost replay situations or restructure situations, wish we could do them differently. And it makes us so anxious that we said this thing or did this thing, and that happened already in the past. But also, of course, we can get anxious and worried about things that haven't happened yet in the future. The happiest women, humans really, are the ones that can truly unhook from both looking too far in the past, looking too much in the future, and just be in this present moment.
Yeah.
But I mean, studying this work and being in this world for so long, I just think a lot of times people throw around those terms of like, just be in the present and just be grateful in the moment and just, you know, and you're like, okay, thank you for the advice. And it sounds really lovely. And it is lovely. And when you can hold on to those moments, it's amazing. But the rest of the world doesn't stop. And so we have a lot on our minds all the time. And so the idea of just be more present because it's a gift and just be more present because you won't be depressed or anxious sounds beautiful. I think it's more helpful to try and teach people coping strategies than to kind of just hope that they can just be grateful and be present.
That's beautiful. I love the way that you explain that. I think you did that really well and also kind of help to put things in perspective and also not to just take everything for face value just because we see a quote and it hits and somehow we think it's like reality or truth. Although there could be some truth to it. I really love the way that you elaborated on that. So you were talking about coping mechanisms then. So what are some strategies that you can advise my listeners on today?
So, a lot of, I will say, the women that I work with now, so my business has changed, has shifted dramatically. It used to be primarily clinical.
Mm.
And I started this coaching business as soon as I was more inspired to thrive in my life and learning these techniques in positive psychology. I started to feel like I need to tell women. Women need to know this. And it felt very much like this urgency that I had to tell the masses. I have to tell women, you must hear me today. Like, we have other alternatives. We have other ways to live. We don't have to survive our lives. We don't have to feel caught up in the rat race. Listen to this message. And so I built a coaching business. And in this business is where I primarily work with women who wake up unfulfilled but successful.
Mm.
So they've done all the right things, but they're still not super content what's going on. And a lot of it, I do not see, like I don't treat depression in my coaching clients, but I do see a lot of worry and anxiety in my coaching clients.
Yeah.
And a lot of the worry is about, okay, once have the awareness, the self-awareness that I'm unfulfilled, number one, I have nervousness around what am I going to do about that? What do I do with that information? Do I just brush it under the rug for another year or decade and hope that things just get better on their own? Or the idea of facing the reality of being unfulfilled and doing something about it feels scary because what does that mean? There used to be this script for us to follow. You go to high school here and you go to college and you get a job and you get married and you have kids and you buy a house and all those things. And the idea that the script ran out, all of a sudden we're like, okay, well, now what do we do if we're choosing an alternative? What does that look like? And how do I know it's secure? The answer is you don't. And so coping skills comes down to resilience building.
Yeah.
It comes down to confidence building, but confidence in the sense of doing things that make you nervous or out of your comfort zone so that you could start building that self-trust. I've got my own back no matter what happens. I don't need a guarantee to be okay. I have made it through every bad day I've had so far. Like, I can do this. And honestly, using people in our lives, influencers, even on social media, dare I say, as inspiration for better. We look at social media, for example, and we think it's just the worst, and it really gives people the wrong idea of what's possible or what's likely or whatever it is. And honestly, I think if we use it for good or use it for the right reasons, we can keep ourselves quite inspired to witness women actually doing the very things we wish we had the courage to do. And so coping really comes down to building self-trust by following through on the things that we say.
Yeah.
But it also comes down to staying connected to your values and desires. And many women, if I were to say to you today or to your listeners, like, oh, what do you really want? Many women would be like, I don't know. No one asked me that. I don't ask me that. I just get what I have to get done. I have too much time. I don't have any time to think about what I want. I have things to do.
Yeah.
And so that's where it comes down to. How do we get stronger? We get stronger by going out of our comfort zone and showing to ourselves that we can do these things. We get stronger by considering alternatives and allowing ourselves to script a new path and to plan out a new path. And if that path doesn't work the way that we want it to, we just have our own backs and try something else. Experimentation is very courageous, but also very necessary to design your life on your terms.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You're preaching to the choir, Wendy. I love everything that you're saying. It's this is really good. So kind of going back to a little bit what we were talking about in the whole thing about saying no, the answer is no. Why is it that women keep saying yes when they should be saying no? And how did you come to understand this?
One reason we say no, I say yes as much as we do, is because we're expected to. So
Mm.
there are social norms around women are generous of their time and energy and they're loving and they take care of the community and their worlds, their bubbles. And so there's an expectation that women say yes. If you can, you say yes. If you're you're asked to volunteer at your children's school or you're asked to get onto a board or you're asked to do something extra at work, the idea is that we're going to be accommodating and we're going to be amicable, and we're going to be what is the word I'm thinking of? There's a word I'm thinking of course it's on the tip of my tongue, but essentially agreeable.
Mm. Yeah.
So one big reason is that there's an expectation for us to be pretty agreeable humans. But the other one is that we've learned that when we do say yes, people really like that. They
Yeah.
like when we say yes to helping them. They like when we say yes to doing XYZ. And so now we feel liked. Now we feel important. Now we feel dependable. We feel reliable. And it makes us feel better. I'm good enough now because I'm needed. I'm good enough now because I'm dependable or because I'm the go-to person. People can count on me. That makes me feel good. And while there is a beautiful part of being dependable and to being agreeable and all those pieces, it just unfortunately goes too far. And so what happens is that women say yes too much. And when you say yes too much, you start to fracture that self-trust because you're abandoning yourself. What you truly want, what your capacity is, what you can handle, what you want to handle, what you want to say yes to, all of those things tend to get dismissed or minimized in the name of being the good girl,
Mm.
being the nice girl, being the helpful, dependable girl, being the liked girl. And so we start to split away from ourselves. And this is why discontent, loneliness is so prevalent right now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I recently, are you familiar with Alison Armstrong at all?
No.
No, okay. So she has essentially written a bunch of book in where I can only my assumption or my perception of this is that her entire goal is for men and women to understand each other, ourselves, and live in harmony. And when you're explaining some of these things about women, a different way in which she would kind of explain this instinctively, and I wonder what you would think about this, is that she's kind of explaining it or kind of comparing it if you're looking back at like hunter-gatherers time and that like instinctively men would be like generally speaking more majorly men would generally speaking be more of the hunters and women would be gatherers, and the reasons why is because the women would always know like where the good berries were, where the poisonous mushrooms are, where the tiger is, where the danger is, because we're always scanning for danger, because what women value more than anything else is safety. So the reason why we are so accommodating, why we're so pleasing, why we're doing everything for others is because essentially what we think is that we're going to be saved from the tiger. And I
Mm,
thought that was just such an interesting way of putting it, because when she said it, I audibly laughed and I was like, why does that feel so real? Although it
yeah.
sounds ridiculous, but it's that component of safety. And it's like, well, do I have to do all of these things for you to give me what I need? Or my needs going to be met if I do all of these things? And we're not even questioning whether or not that's true. It's just this instinct because we want to feel safe and we think that it might make us feel safe. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. We feel safe in community.
Yeah,
So that is also why when we talk about women being expected to be generous of their time and energy and to be giving, it's because community is a major value
right.
of our society. Women having that community, why is community important? For safety. But the way that because there's no saber-toothed tigers hunting us right now,
Yeah,
the way that those threats come up into our existence is
yeah.
being unliked, being disliked, being rejected. And
Yes,
so the version of safety now that we are so scared of is not quite the same as life or death saber-toothed tiger,
of
but
course.
it is emotionally very scary to us to think about being rejected or disliked or shunned. And so the yeses feel like they do come from this place of pressure to belong.
Right.
If
Yeah.
we belong, we're safe. If we say yes, we are liked. So if we're safe and we're liked, then I don't have to worry about being kicked out of the group, about being alone, about being on my own.
Mhm.
Whereas many, 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 many years ago, that would be really potentially devastating to our survival. Now it feels more devastating to our emotional health,
Right.
not
Yeah.
so much physical.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point, because it's like I think ever like before I read all of this literature, I would be very critical on myself. I'm very harsh on myself on qualities like this where I'm just realizing a lot of it is just instinct and it's nothing to be judgmental about. Like wanting to be safe, it's not something to be ashamed of. And I mean like as women, we generally tend to maybe compare ourselves to each other, and when we were young, we would be looking up to the person who got the most attention for whoever we liked, because like, well, is he going to save that person from the tiger, or are they going to save me from the tiger? That seems to work, so I'll be doing that. Or like, I wonder how much of all of these things that we've done since we were kids were actually just instinctual and we weren't even aware that we were doing it. And then the older we get and the more aware we are, we realize that like we're just acting out our nature, and we don't need to be so hard on each other for it. I'd rather just understand what if there's a perfectly reasonable explanation as to why we're doing the things that we do, but when the awareness part of it here is so crucial.
It is so crucial because we need to recognize that we can say, it's in my nature, it's instinctive for me to want to belong. And is there a certain degree of importance to belonging? 100%. Of course, we know that that's very important, but not at the cost of self-abandonment,
Right.
not at the cost of overriding
Mhm.
who we want to be and how we want to feel in our lives. It's not working in our favor to overextend ourselves, to overcommit ourselves so much that we wake up with anxiety, that we wake up with regret, that we wake up with resentment in our relationships because we've swung the pendulum so far into yes land that we have now completely disconnected from ourselves and don't even know what we want or like or value anymore. And this is why it's so important to take everything, in my opinion, a step further beyond awareness. Awareness is huge always. If we want anything to be better, yes, we need to be aware. But what I see so much of the time is that women have a level of awareness of why they might not be happy or what's getting in their way of feeling fulfilled, but then they stop there and land in the zone of complaining about it or commiserating with girlfriends about it, but then not shifting it, changing it, restructuring life to make it better. It doesn't mean that my brand is all about the answer is no. It's all about learning what your no's are so that you can make very aligned yeses and your life can feel like a hell yes again.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, and this is why the word no gets everyone up in a tizzy, is
Yeah.
because it sounds like a bad word. It's something women are really taught not to use, yet it's really important if we want to have our energy protected, our spirit, our zest protected, our time, our precious time protected, doing what we truly want and love. We have to start saying no. And it doesn't have to come across the way we say no can be said with love, it can be said with thoughtfulness, it can be said with respect, but it needs to be said. Otherwise, we will hear everyone complaining, I have no time and I'm too busy and this and that, and all those reasons, excuses for not living the life you want. No is the answer if you want to start living life that feels happier to you, more fulfilling to you. It has to involve more no.
Yeah. So how did you then first start to recognize what no was let me put what yes was a no and what yes is a clear yes to help women identify what it looks like for them? Because I think a lot of us might not even be aware that we're doing it. So, or at least understand that if we do say the thing we find scary, that we will in fact be safe.
You have no guarantees of safety besides having your own back. And we want to search for safety within ourselves, not from other people,
Yeah.
because truly the risks involved with somebody not liking your no or somebody not liking your boundary are often, if not more than often, most of the time, not threatening, not very threatening at all. And so we need to start to say, okay, hold on a second. And the journey that I took was to literally start by mapping out my life, like a time audit. If you're a super type A or A minus human, you might want to do a little time audit. How is my time being spent? And to look at each of those pieces of a day, give it a couple of days, maybe 2, 3 days of an audit, typical week for you. How's my time being spent? And look at each piece, each 30-minute segment of your day and asking yourself, okay, like which of these things did I want to do? Which ones what are the happy I said yes to committing to? Which ones are the things that reflect the way I want to feel in my life? Which ones don't? And you can just start to get curious around how you're spending your time right now. Once you start to identify how time's being spent, then you can emotionally feel your way through these commitments and obligations that you've said yes to. So what I did was say, all right, this isn't it. Something's got to change. I have these 3 babies. I have these practices. I have a very full life. I have a lot to be grateful for, but I don't feel energized by my life. I feel totally depleted right now. What am I going to change?
Yeah.
So I did a time audit and I looked at the times that I'm spending doing what. And I said to myself, it's my work. The way I have designed my schedule is not working with my natural rhythm of energy during a day or during a week. I am just forcing it because I've had energy historically, and so I can just keep going as an energizer bunny would. But now I'm not in that stage of life anymore. And so, what is my stage of life? What is this chapter? What do I feel like, and what do I want to feel like? So, once you take an audit and look at your commitments and say, which of these light me up, or do I want to continue? Which of these do I feel? You can even feel it in your body. So if it's hard for you to identify the emotional response you have to looking at how time is spent, tune into your body. How does it feel? Is it constricting to think about your time in work or your time with family or your time volunteering or whatever your commitments are? Or does it feel like expanding and exciting and more like how you want to spend time?
Right.
That's a good place to start, is to feel your way through it. And again, it's all about reconnecting with yourself, because so much of the time women have really turned down the volume on listening to their own bodies, listening to their own feelings, and
Yeah.
we just power through.
Yeah. I wonder if you have an answer to this. What is a yes that was the hardest for you to turn into a no?
What was a yes that was hard to turn into a no?
Yeah.
I, gosh, what was a hard yes to turn into a no? I think it likely was around my patient schedule,
Yeah.
because every patient that I saw and see is valuable to me. It has meaning. Like, this is life-changing work. So the idea that I would be saying, and I started to say no to new patients, the idea that I wasn't working at hours that were more accommodating for other people's schedules, my hardworking patients that could only see me in the evening, I needed to start saying no to that, because there was a cost, and the cost did not outweigh the benefit of keeping. It was, now I needed to choose me and my life and my family over somebody else outside of me.
Yeah.
And so that was probably the hardest part, was letting people down,
Mm.
and knowing that me saying I can't do 6 o'clocks anymore, I can't do 5 o'clocks anymore, I can't do, was a moment that I just knew would be disappointing somebody. I'd be letting someone down that was counting on me or that was valuing our time. And now there was a good chance they may not be able to continue. And what did that mean? And so in those moments, I had to remind myself, there is a therapist for everyone. There is somebody out there with more flexible schedule, or there's somebody out there with a different approach that would be a great benefit to them, or there's somebody. So I have to remind myself, and I think this is a valuable reminder for all women, there is someone for everyone. There's
Yeah.
somebody that can fill most of your shoes,
Yeah.
most of your commitments and obligations. There's also somebody else very capable of doing those things too.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be us. In fact, if we choose for it to be us, there will be some other cost or trade-off, but only we can decide when it's not worth that trade-off anymore, when that's not working for us anymore.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I definitely think that there's a lot of people who are going to resonate to that. And, or just like even not fully a sidetrack, but I had a similar conversation the other day regarding just the imposter syndrome of being a life coach and thinking that like everyone's a life coach today. And then I had that very exact conversation with myself that like, you know what? I know that I can listen to two podcasts, same guest, but there's different ways of interviewing or talking or whatnot, and one will resonate fully and the other won't. And sometimes you will hear the message from a particular person and it will just hit, or you will hear it from a person for the fifth time, but at the right time, so it sticks. So all of a sudden,
Yes.
it's actually valuable, and that you might just be the voice for that someone. And that was like a similar thought I had to myself about like, oh yeah, there might be so many life coaches out there, but I wasn't trying to coach everyone anyways, kind of, you know?
Exactly right. You're not trying to coach everyone anyways, and you wouldn't
Yeah.
be amazing, unfortunately, at coaching everyone. It doesn't work that way. Same thing goes for relationships or friendships,
Yeah.
working life situations. We want to be the person who is great at everything or good enough at everything. Actually, it reminds me of a conversation with my daughter. And she was saying to me the other night, I'm just not great at anything.
Oh,
And it was really bothering her. And
oh.
I thought it was so interesting, because I'm not great at anything. And it's never bothered me that I'm not great at anything. Like, I'm
That
like good
sounds
at
like a
some
lie.
things. I know, but it may sound like a lie, but I don't believe, in my heart, I feel like I'm good at some things.
Yeah.
I'm definitely good enough in some areas, good
Yeah.
enough. Like, I'm getting by and not doing harm and all these good things. Like, but great, like, I am great at this. And it was interesting because there's a poll, like, she wanted to feel great, like truly excel, to be the best
Yeah.
at something. And I thought that's so interesting. I've never had the aspiration of being the best at anything.
Mhm.
I've never valued being the best at anything. It never felt to me like I had to be the best to be good enough. I knew very well where good enough would land. It was somewhere around fine,
Yeah.
somewhere around fine. And I'm like, okay, I can shoot for fine. Now, if it's something that makes us really happy or passionate about it, and at the time we were talking about her passions and what she loves to do. And I found myself in this place initially as a mom of wanting to convince her that she's really the best at things. Like you feel pulled to want to support your child and they're suffering and say, no, 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 you are amazing at this and you are
Yeah.
amazing at that. And so I started off saying that to her in some way. You're so great at this and you're so incredible at that. And then I thought, hold, let's have a real conversation. Like, why does it matter to be the best?
Yeah.
Like, why is that? Is it all or nothing? Why do I have to be the best in the class or the best at this thing, or it's just falling short?
Yeah.
Why can't we all have our little positions? There's always someone, and I've told my kids this, my dad always told me this, and I found it very helpful. There will always be someone better than you, and there'll always be someone worse. There'll always be someone prettier than you, smarter than you, more athletic than you, and there'll always be someone less than those things of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And so instead of feeling like, oh, it's the best or it's bust,
Hmm.
why can't we just lean into our strengths, highlight our strengths, optimize the parts of ourselves that we want to shine and love the journey of it, love the learning, the growth, and the progress
Yeah.
without it having to equal some type of level of measurement
Yeah.
to be enough.
Yeah.
So it's a very different conversation that I didn't even realize was so conditioned in me. And
Yeah.
then I said, hold on a second. No, we're going to talk about why the best is even the thing we need to be good enough.
Yeah. I love how you caught yourself in an instinct of just wanting to like, no, 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 you're great. But also recognizing that it's probably somewhat instinctual for her too to want to be the greatest. I actually heard this in one of these books that I read that like we want to be the greatest. It's like if a man, for instance, were to say that some other girl is like, oh, she was so great at that, and then it's your partner, it's like, oh, but am I better? I need to know that I'm better. Otherwise, you're
Right.
gonna save her from the tiger, and I'm not.
Right. Or you're going to leave me for her,
Because she's
right?
great, isn't she?
Because she's so fantastic. Why didn't you just stay with her?
You did such a beautiful job there of just grounding that and recognizing your own instinct and recognizing her instinct and try to have a constructive conversation as opposed to diminish her feeling or to, yeah, just brush it down to avoid the discomfort of it all. I think a lot of people would do that because they just would want them to instinctively feel better right there, right then. Whereas what's going to make them
Yes.
feel better long term is that conversation of addressing,
Right.
but why?
It almost felt like there was like a band-aid and then there was like a true healing opportunity. And don't get me wrong, that's one of the rare moments I can like recognize those things in real live time. But it did feel like almost like I could do the thing that almost feels like a knee-jerk reaction, and that's just soothe, quickly soothe, get the band-aid.
Right.
But really the idea in my mind suddenly was, well, actually what's more important is how she's defining her good enoughness now as an 11-year-old, as a 12-year-old, as a 13-year-old. That's now this is more imperative than ever that she starts to develop a sense of self that feels strong, capable, and good enough without having to hit some mark. Because if she doesn't do that and learn that now, she'll be chasing it forever, which is why there's so many women that are waking up still feeling not good enough and not like they haven't accomplished anything and they're not haven't achieved anything and they just haven't done enough in life. And it's like if we can just stop chasing something that doesn't actually lead to fulfillment, we would save ourselves so many tears and so many years.
That's beautiful when it rhymes. I don't know why. I just love a good rhyme. Well, you know what, Wendy? I think that you do a great job of is answering these questions thoughtfully and with so much awareness, a lot of self-awareness and a lot of reflection. I think everything we've just talked about had just landed so well in me, and I'm really, really grateful I got to have this conversation with you. And I wonder, is there anything we haven't talked about yet that you really, really want to talk about?
I could chat with you all day because I just find these conversations so exciting,
Yeah,
especially when I think about the impact and just even one person
yeah,
listening today and just thinking, oh my gosh, it's right. I'm not giving myself permission to change my answers or to change my story or to change my life. I'm not considering alternatives. I keep measuring myself up to some unrealistic standard, or I keep saying yes too much when I really need to start saying no. Like
yeah,
all of that's just exciting to think about the domino effect that can exist from conversations like this. So we've covered a lot of ground.
yeah,
I think we've given your listeners a lot to contemplate, which is exciting. And we
yeah.
can always do a part two someday because I'm
Oh,
sure we could go into so many more parts of this.
I would love to. I have an idea in mind, and if you think this is completely horrific, I will just cut this out of the interview. But I was thinking about something because, like I told you, I've really been going down this rabbit hole, and I'm really, really fond of Alison Armstrong's work and the books that she has read. And I think a lot of what you are saying is very tied to this, but she has like an instinctive like explanation to all of it, and she does such a beautiful job of like hand holding the women and the men in the process of understanding these differences and what we've misunderstood about each other. And I'm really trying to find more people who are willing to look into her work so we can discuss it more, because I've honestly, so the first book that I read is called The Keys to the Kingdom, and I feel like I have the keys to the kingdom. And just to give you some context, I've always struggled with my relationship with my dad. And I mean, this podcast is called Becoming Secure because of my immense anxious attachment that just destroyed my relationship with men. And I learned about this book, and as much as I read up on attachment theory, which was helpful, but when I read this book and the Queen's Code, it changed everything. It was like I got this brand new understanding of men's behavior and why it's a perfectly good explanation to everything that they do. And so to bring me to the point, I would love to do a conversation where we talk more around like the topic of all of that, but that would of course require you to actually research some of her, which I understand it's a major ask, but nonetheless, I would love to talk to you about more things, even if it was about something else. I think maybe I'm hopeful that someone will also listen to this and want to continue to go down that rabbit hole with me, just because it quite literally healed my relationship with my dad. And I live with my dad now,
Amazing.
and I'm almost 30, so that's crazy. And and yeah, like I said, my relationship with my boyfriend, I genuinely feel like I've hit the jackpot here, and I didn't even believe that was ever going to be possible. I knew I always wanted it, but I just didn't understand how to accomplish it, and now I do. I know how to talk to men now. I understand how to get what I want and not be so offended by everything. So
I love this. All right, I'm going to read these books. I'm going to read these two books.
yeah, you would do that?
And then I can't tell you exactly when,
Okay.
but I will be reading them.
Yeah.
And then let's come back and have a conversation.
I would that oh my gosh, I'm exploding. Thank you. I would love that. That would be amazing because
Let's
first of all,
do
you
it.
have this expertise, and the way that you're talking about things and explaining concepts are so profound. It's so unique. And it seems so easy when you talk about these things. And I would love for these concepts to also come across more professionally, because first of all, I'm still so afraid of being misunderstood and to budge it or not really do a good enough job of like retelling it or explaining it further. So having someone like you in my corner would be incredible.
I'd love to. Let's plan it.
Awesome. Well, Wendy, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for being on my podcast. I'm positive that you'll bring so much value to not only the clients or everything that you already have, but of course my listeners and so many people out there. I'm so grateful. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you for having me. This was great.